Okay, well, Summer Games 2, obviously, a sequel to Summer Games 1. Summer Games 2 was the first game in the game series that I got to work on the first version of, as opposed to doing a port of. On Summer Games 1, my work was porting Summer Games 1 to the Apple II. But, so I didn't get a chance to choose any of the events. In Summer Games 2, I was part of the team that got to choose the events.
And so how many events did you work on that game? Because I understand there were several developers involved, and they each worked on a different game within the Summer Games.
Yeah, I haven't looked at the event list. Can you go over that real quick for me? What events are in Summer Games 2? It's been many, many years.
Oh, come on. You don't remember? It was only
Okay.
like 30 years ago or something,
Well,
right? I mean,
yeah, absolutely. But also, you have to understand that I've worked on a lot of different games in the game series, and I have a hard time remembering which one is which. I worked on Summer Games 2 and Winter Games and the Game Summer Edition and California Games and just a ton of them.
Oh, yeah. California Games was good, too. So the event list had 8 events.
Yeah,
there were triple jump, high jump, rowing, javelin throw, equestrian, fencing, kayaking, and cycling.
Okay, I did cycling, I think I did triple jump, and I'm pretty sure I did rowing.
So you did 3 out of 8. That's a pretty good chunk.
I'm not sure about triple jump. I'm pretty sure I did rowing. I know I did rowing, and I know I did cycling. I think I did triple jump.
And did you guys I know there was a number of developers that worked on this game, and I think that this was one of those games where, at the time, most games were still design, coded, music, graphics, and whatnot by one person. So the fact that you guys had a number of people working on this was a little bit unusual. Did people help you with the individual events as well? Did you help each other, or did you kind of work in isolation?
Well, obviously, the events were designed to be small, separate games that were all tied together with a menuing program. And there was a small block of memory that was used to pass the stuff back and forth, the parameters. And so as far as collaboration, the individual game programmer, designers, obviously we're all working in the same building and we're working together on the same thing. So, we would help each other somewhat as far as debugging or, making suggestions. Now the art was done by the art team, and it's a, nice talented group. So you didn't have this really cheesy programmer art. You had, people who that was their job, was to try to make it look good.
And so you worked on Summer Games 2, obviously you mentioned, and you mentioned California Games as well, and I see that's in sort of a list. Were these games, obviously I remember them being very popular. Did you guys realize how popular they were at the time? I guess you did from the sales, but how did that evolve into California Games? Were you guys looking for other things to do that were similar and yet different, or how did that come about?
Well, I think what was going on with California Games, obviously after doing so many games in the game series, we're kind of reaching for new material because it's, only so many things you can do doing Olympic events. But there was a project manager game designer at Epyx at the time, Matt Householder, and I'm pretty sure that California Games was his brainchild, but the project itself was managed by myself and Kevin Furry, who is one of the other programmers on the team. Well, that's California Games, that is.
Right.
Did I answer your question?
Yep. Yeah,
Okay,
I was just
good.
kind of curious how, and really, I guess the other thing I kind of want to know is, did you guys, realize that these games were obviously the sales would have indicated that they were popular,
yeah.
but did you realize how popular they would become and continue to be as time went on?
I don't think so. Actually, it's funny. California Games, I thought that the public was burnt out on it. I actually told my co-manager, Kevin, which we called him Fuzzy, that I didn't think it was going to be successful, and he was convinced it would be successful. And it's a darn good thing it was, because it was one of the last projects I got royalties on, and because Fuzzy gave me all of his royalties, God bless him, I don't know why, I was able to make enough on California Games and the residuals to put a down payment on a house.
Oh, wow. Now,
the thing is, California Games was different from all the rest. I know we're talking about Summer Games too, but I want to say the thing that was different about California Games and why I think it was popular was because as programmers, none of us were Olympic competitors, but the stuff that was in California Games was stuff that we were interested in, stuff that we could do. We could go out and play hacky sack. We had the guy who wrote surfing was actually from Hawaii. I actually was a skateboarder. So, you know, these were things that we could put more of our heart into, and I think that's why it came out so much better.
So speaking to that, the fact that for Summer Games you were programming games that you were familiar with the actual sport, how did that?
No.
Sorry?
In Summer Games too, we were doing Olympic events, so we weren't.
Sorry, in California Games.
Yeah,
that's what I meant.
In California Games, we were familiar with this stuff because it was, you know, we're from California, we do this stuff.
Right. So going to Summer Games, then you're programming games that are essentially Olympic events. Did you do any kind of at the time research on those games, like talk to people who did those games, or how did you approach programming the ones you did?
Well, you know, of course we watched the Olympics, you know, to see, you know, how the events played. But the only one I actually really did that I personally did any research on was in Winter Games, the luge event. I actually got in touch with an Olympic luge competitor and talked to him for a while about how luge worked and what you did to make your speed better and, you know, what type of variances there were in speed. And I think because of that, I might have made it a little too realistic. Because he told me that, you know, the difference between a good time and a bad time was, you know, like a second or, you know, maybe a fraction of a second. That was the difference in time. So, you know, and it was all about getting your line right so that you minimize the path that you were doing. So I designed it that way so that it was, you had to basically have the course memorized and know when you were coming, what the next screen was and where the best place to enter that screen was and exit that screen in order to maximize your time. And the variances in good times were very, very minimal because we're talking about it just you're traveling a few pixels less. So.
Yeah.